I do want to start first with these metals tariffs. Of course, a big announcement made on Friday, and we should point out this all kind of started during the first Trump administration, of course, when he imposed those 25% tariffs on steel, 10% on aluminum, and 7 years later, here we are once again.
Yeah, unclear why people are believing that Trump is touching the hot stove and then going to find more market rationality. It's like, oh, the markets are a constraint. I hear it every day from clients. The markets are a constraint. They are much less of a constraint on Trump this time around than they were in his first term. He's not running again. He was almost assassinated. He's incredibly confident. He believes that he has all the answers. He shouldn't listen to his advisors. And his advisors aren't willing to tell him when they think that he's doing something wrong. And so it's not the markets don't matter, but they matter a lot less as a constraint on the president this time around. And so, when the judges say, sorry, we're not going to let you use IEPA for your Liberation Day, he's going to find 20 other ways to try to get the outcomes that he wants done. And that means forcing countries around the world to capitulate. It doesn't mean backing off and saying, oh, sorry, I guess I couldn't really do that.
Well, I am curious whether those countries will capitulate. We know that some nations have sort of made overtures, some in earnest, some maybe not so. And I am curious as to whether these nations are going to feel compelled to really come to the table with something substantive, or if they maybe feel compelled to either A, wait this out, or more importantly, Ian, maybe just try to walk away.
Well, I was annoyed at the FT guy that used the term taco trade, that Trump always chickens out. Since, the first country, when I hear taco, the first country I want to make sure it applies to is Mexico. And it's exactly the opposite of what Mexico's done. It's a critical trade partner of the United States. Over 80% of their exports come to the U.S. All their tourism comes to the U.S. Their remittances flow back to Mexico from the U.S. All their drugs go to the United States. They rely on the U.S. for everything. And as a consequence, they capitulate. And that's exactly what they've done. It's what they've done on the border. It's what they've done on fentanyl. It's what they've done on Chinese transshipment of goods. It's even what they're doing for water at a time of drought when their own farmers aren't getting what they need. So, if the taco trade doesn't apply to Mexico, then, it explains why they have such bad tacos in the UK, perhaps. But more seriously, there are countries around the world that won't capitulate, like China. China recognizes this is going to hurt them more economically than the U.S., but they can handle the pain politically much better than Trump and his democratic system with checks and balances, albeit weakened. And then there are other countries that are going to slow roll a little bit because they'll see maybe I can get a better deal now. Maybe, it's going to be harder now given that the judges are making it more challenging for Trump, that there are all of these deals he wants to get done, but they aren't getting done as quickly as he'd like.
Right.
So, like so many things out there, it's complicated. And, in the media, we want to say it's black or it's white, that Trump is a coward or he's a predator. And in reality, it really depends on who he's fighting against.
Yeah, and we love our acronyms, so there's also that as well. Ian,
That's true. That's true. And it's a good acronym.
Yeah, it is a really good one.
It is a good acronym. It's almost Bricks-worthy in that regard.
Almost. Like maybe we keep that for a while. Nonetheless, though, the result seems to be a change in how America sees itself and puts itself out there on the geopolitical stage, economic stage as well. Does that translate into a sell U.S. exceptionalism, or is that also too black and white?
Oh, we've been selling U.S. exceptionalism for decades now. And by selling it, I don't mean pretending it's working when it's not. I mean that the reality is that other countries around the world are hedging. But hedging U.S. exceptionalism takes a long time. De-risking China is hard, and they're a far less important economy than the U.S. They're not, essential for the world's financial transactions the way the Americans are, and many other things. So, when you see that American exceptionalism doesn't work for you, you try to find other ways to get things done. And I think that everything we see from Europe now in terms of how much money they're spending on defense compared to the last 30 years, that is the Europeans selling American exceptionalism. But when you watch over the coming weeks, when those same European nations get together with Trump at the NATO summit, you're going to see a lot of the reality that the Europeans are literally a decade or more away from being able to supply their own defense capabilities autonomously, from having their own intelligence autonomously, that they don't rely essentially on the Americans. So the reality is this process is going to be a very, very slow-moving one.
Yeah.
Trump's damage to U.S. exceptionalism is something that our children will face. But, fortunately, as one of the most short-term oriented nations in the world, that doesn't bother us very much. Same thing is true with our deficit, of course.
So I wonder, though, where that will eventually show up the most. Will it show up in a structurally weaker dollar, a structurally higher yields on the back end of the curve, for example?
Not in the near term. I don't see it. Again, I think these things are long-term. I think that, you see that when people don't want to come to American universities, that benefits other countries long-term. When you see that people that aren't white, that are really talented, and most of the really talented people in the world don't happen to be white, now feel like the U.S. isn't as welcoming to them as it was to my grandma, for example, fleeing Armenian genocide, coming to Ellis Island. Yeah, that's going to hurt you long term. I think there are lots of these things that will matter long term, but in the near term, you got to understand that over the last 2 decades, we have not been heading to a Thucydides trap where China rises and America declines. That's not what's been happening. What's been happening is America's allies have been becoming more asymmetrically reliant on the United States. The power imbalance that's been growing while China has done well has been between the U.S. continuing to do well and its allies being weaker. So it's European productivity coming off. It's the Europeans not building on their defense. It's Japanese and South Korean demographics falling apart. And that didn't just suddenly happen under Trump. That's been happening for decades. So if the fact that America's allies suddenly get it and they're going to start hedging 3 decades too late, you're not going to suddenly change your views on bond yields and the U.S. dollar on the basis of that come to Jesus moment.
Absolutely, and it's always important to think about those disparities that still exist. Ian, always a great conversation. Ian Bremmer there is the president and founder of the Eurasia Group, as well as G0 Media.